And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. Welcome to the Eat Well Move Well radio show. Very excited to have my guest today, Professor Bill Campbell. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Look, for those that haven't heard of Bill, I've just been astounded with the amount of information he puts out. But Bill is a physique scientist, exercise science professor, and really interesting director of performance and physique enhancement. Bill, I'd really like to find out from you your quals and what you're doing currently. But first off, what's the difference between a professor and a doctor?
So in my country, a doctor is usually, we think of like a physician, like you go when you're sick or you need surgery. But for whatever reason, if you have a PhD, you can also call yourself a doctor, but it's a doctor of philosophy rather than a medical doctor. So I think that's the main difference.
Awesome. Thank you. Your socials are great, and I love what you've done with them. You've captured attention in order to, it seems, allow people to be educated and ask questions. And I think you've done that very successfully. So can we talk about your journey? What made you start this journey of education for yourself? Where did you sort of start at university, and what did you study?
Yes, I can answer it in one word. The reason why I do what I do now is because of bodybuilding. When I was younger, I loved bodybuilding. I loved sports nutrition, dietary supplements, and I was in a different career. I was in sales. I used to sell like bug killer and weed killer. I was like, I don't want to sell bug killer the rest of my life. So I knew, like I said, I love lifting weights. I loved like diets and supplements. So I kind of did a career change, had to go back to school to get all of my science prerequisites. And I kind of thought maybe I would work for a sports nutrition company when I first went back to school. And the longer I was in school, I realized, man, I really like this research area. It's kind of like, I'm a cynic. I don't believe much. I always question everything. Like my young kids will say, I love you. And I'm like, well, prove it. Do you really love me? Like, I'm constantly just asking questions. I'm a natural cynic. So I think being a scientist is what I believe I was created to do. It fits my personality and my mindset well. So I'm definitely doing what I believe I was created to do.
That's a really interesting thing to change your career path, change the direction, and I think it's very brave. I've interviewed a lot of special forces guys the last few weeks. I was in the military and special forces, and it's a big for a lot of us. It's the hardest thing we've ever done is changing from the military to civilian life, changing a career, and for you to then go and pay for education and things like that, it's really brave, man. What did you go and study?
So my first degree was marketing, and that's the career that, again, I just wasn't passionate about. So when I decided to go back to college or back to the university, I had to take, before I even went there, I had to take a lot of prerequisites. So I took anatomy and physiology, biochemistry, chemistry, organic chemistry, all of these prerequisites, because all of my classes up until this point were in business. So the degree that I got was a master's degree in exercise physiology. And then after that, I stayed at the same university, which was Baylor University, which is in Texas. And then I got a PhD there in exercise, nutrition, and preventive health.
That's interesting. Exercise, nutrition, and preventive health. Back in my day, those sort of angles at human physiology were not available. But I can see how they can tie in, but most people looking at your stuff on the surface is you get females in amazing shape. You get really amazing sports performance, but your PhD there really must have tied in well to those two things. Exercise, nutrition. So you've done that for your PhD. Where are you now? What do you do in your lab? What do you put out?
So my first job out of my PhD was at the University of South Florida, and I'm still here. It's been about 15 years that I've been here. And the reason that I'm here was when I graduated and it was time to start applying for jobs, I asked my wife, hey, where would you like to live? Like I can apply anywhere. She said, we can live anywhere you want or anywhere you think you'd want to apply. And then I said, good. And then she wasn't done yet. She goes, as long as it's very hot. So I was like, okay, but that basically writes off 2/3 of the country of the United States. So Florida's a very hot state. I applied to several jobs here and was very blessed to be able to get the job that I have. And I've been here for 15 years. And you mentioned earlier, I'm a professor of exercise science, and I direct a research laboratory called the Performance and Physique Enhancement Laboratory.
Performance and physique enhancement. Let's unpack that into maybe layman's terms. Physique enhancement. What do you, when someone comes into your lab, or no, I'll go back a stage. Do you mainly do research on those subjects? Do people come to you to get better? What are the people you're working with?
Yeah, so my research it's basically on the vanity side of the exercise profession. It's for people who are not obese and generally not overweight, who want to look leaner, who want to lose more body fat, even though they don't need to for health purposes, or they want to build more muscle. So again, people, they look at themselves in the mirror and sometimes they make changes. Some people wear makeup, some people buy new clothes. And I approach this from an exercise and a diet perspective. So I'm helping people change their physique, change their body from those perspectives, not from pharmaceuticals, not from drugs, not from clothes. So it's still, I wouldn't call it fashion, but it's the vanity side. There's a lot of other people in my space that are curing cancer, or at least trying to find solutions to cancer. That's just not what I do. And that's very important work. And it's kind of amazing that there's not many people who do what I do. There's not a lot of people who are answering the question, because a lot of people in the fitness space, they want to be leaner and they often don't do it in a very healthy manner. So I try to find solutions for them, or I research things that helps them achieve their physique goals, but in a way that helps them with longer term success, or to make it part of their lifestyle.
Now we're getting into the nitty gritty. I'm loving it. You've said something that I've never heard other people intimate to. You talked about some people put on makeup, some people put on clothes. You're very polite. Some people get plastic surgery. And then you said some people use drugs. So for physique enhancement. But really, you're teaching how to use exercise and or nutrition to get a result. And that's really important, because the weight loss industry, the diet industry is billions of dollars, and most people really screw it up, to be fair, right?
Yeah. And my message and my research, the outcomes of my research, it's not what anybody wants to hear. I advocate for a very slow and patient process. It's not sexy. You have to have a commitment to a lifestyle of exercise, a commitment to a lifestyle of food preparation. Again, nobody wants to hear this, but I'm a scientist. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not selling a product. Actually, I do have a guidebook, but other than that, I'm not selling anything. Like, I don't have anything to gain. So I think people know what I'm saying is the reality. And I hope and trust that people, they come to me because of that, because they trust that, yeah, I know this is hard. And another thing that I'm realizing, I'm in my mid 40s now, it even gets harder the older you get. My body doesn't respond like it used to. So it's not like you get better with time.
It's crazy, isn't it? I agree. I'm 48 years old, still thinking my body's like in my 20s, and things are not responding how they should. Touching on your healthy solutions for that, and am I right in saying mainly you focus on the female side, the side that's been missed majoritively in this world?
Yes, yeah. the majority, at least of my recent research. So years ago, I did more performance-based, like strength, powerlifting. That was more male focused. But in the last few years, we've definitely focused on female physique enhancement, and there's two reasons for that. One is, well, one, I just love females. I got married a female. I've got two daughters. I got female cat. So there's that. The second thing is they've largely been ignored in the exercise science research literature. It's just that they haven't had the same opportunities as males as research participants. And I just from my experience, it seems like a lot of the unhealthy dieting approaches tend to be followed by females. They're more in a diet culture. So I think the research that I do by focusing on that population provides immeasurably more value to them.
I can see exactly what your thought process is there. You talked about diet culture, and really, let's knuckle down to maybe that public population. They're the ones that are marketed to. They're the ones that's aimed at, and they're the ones that don't get it right. That really pushes to the mental side of things. You provide healthy solutions for physique enhancement as vanity, but I think you're selling yourself short there. I think it's one of those things that's super important for people with their self-esteem, their self-worth, which has come from marketing. But we can't fix that, so let's fix your health. Let's use your healthy solutions. Most people in the physique enhancement space, in particular females, I've found from my bodybuilding days, personal trainer days to now, they really struggle with the mental side, don't they?
Yeah, and I'm not an exercise psychologist, so I'm not necessarily focused on the psychology of dieting or their behavior. But yeah, I agree with what you say there. And you didn't say something else that I it's not like I kind of help people with their physiques, and they come, people will look at my research for that purpose. But what I'm doing is kind of slipping in health without them even knowing, because everything I advocate, I mean, resistance training, what does that prevent? Osteoporosis 30 years later. What does a higher protein diet help? Well, it helps with muscle mass gains, and then that helps offset sarcopenia later in life. Not gaining body fat. Again, I'm a fat loss researcher, essentially. Not having excess body fat. That solves a whole lot of health problems. So yeah, I kind of have on my, my storefront, lose weight or get leaner, but you could appreciate what you kind of alluded to. You're getting a lot of healthy habits and lifestyle also. It's just that I'm not portraying that as the reason, but it's there every bit as much as fat loss and muscle gain.
Absolutely. I love that. Healthy habits, long-term solutions. I interviewed Dr. Nick Gill, same deal as you, some very highly educated. He's the head strength and conditioning coach for the New Zealand All Blacks rugby. Interviewed him the other day. Really interesting cat, but he loves teaching health, and that's not what we went to university for 20 years ago. We want to get bigger, stronger, faster, and train these guys. But we've all seemed to have gone, hang on a sec, health is probably where it's almost chicken and the egg, really, isn't it? A healthy person is going to be lean, strong, free from disease. And if you're doing those things that promote that, you'll also be healthy. So that's really clever, big picture stuff I think you've got going there, Bill.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's something that as people age, they appreciate more and more. But something else that I think a lot of people don't like to admit, but the research does make it clear, your physical appearance is a large driver of motivations to exercise. And again, we can debate whether exercise or dieting is more effective for fat loss, or clearly it's more effective for enhancing muscle mass is resistance training. But so I do embrace the physical attributes of the research that I do, but I'm not going to separate the health that comes along with it.
Exactly, but it's so different back in my gosh, I've finally thrown those words in. I'm showing my age because back in my day, 17 years old, I can't remember I won the some bodybuilding titles over here in New Zealand and so on. But literally it was 2 months of white rice and white fish, 5 meals a day. And I was weak as a kitten, looked amazing for 60 seconds on stage, but absolutely terrible shape. And as we learned, as we hopefully got some kind of knowledge transfer, ended up into the special forces healthy and had an amazing body as a side effect. But back in the day, we just did it just to get on the stage and be lean for that little second, that one day. And then I remember one competition, I put on 10 kilos the next day.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That's not healthy. And I love what you're doing, but let's drill down on females, because again, in the old days, the studies were just, you're a human. But females are different. So let's expand on that. I'm going to work back from age. You talked about putting on weight as we age. I probably know the answer, but you're incredibly educated. What happens to the older female when she starts to put on body fat hormonally? So perimenopausal, menopausal, if they put on too much of that abdominal body fat, what sort of happens there?
Well, and that's an area that I'm earnestly trying to learn about. So I don't have research in this area. I've done one study in obese females that were postmenopausal, but I haven't done this in an exercising active population. So I'm going to answer this from a perspective of what people come to me for, their symptoms. And again, and I'm going to speak from an area of ignorance here because I still have a lot to learn about that age and the whole perimenopause, postmenopause, that age. But what I'm seeing are, and I do posts on this sometimes, so I get a lot of feedback. And it's funny, women that are going through menopause, they say there's no research in what we do. And the reality is there's a lot of research in menopausal females, those going through menopause, postmenopause. But here's where that statement comes from. The fitness industry just doesn't acknowledge it. There's nobody cares about a postmenopausal female or what their problems are. It's very young focused. It's fitness. It's females have been ignored. And then within that population, in the profession, a middle-aged, or as in female is aging, they're even more ignored in our broad profession. So what I'm seeing is, and again, just as anecdotally, I'm not speaking from the research literature, and as we'll discuss, this is an either or. So the hormones start to change, energy levels tend to start to go down, and now motivation for exercise decreases. Just overall energy levels are starting to tank, and that starts to have an impact on exercise consistency. So now you're not exercising as much. Now you start to gain more fat. Well, did you gain additional fat because of going through menopause, or is it because you have reduced your exercise intensity, your exercise volume? I don't know, but what I'm appreciating, and again, this is an area that I'm hoping to learn a lot more about, is to help to learn about that population, what can be done to help. Because it's easy for me to say, eat more protein, resistance train, and do some cardio. I'm telling you, the females that reach out to me, they have no energy. They have no drive. And these are women who have been very active their entire lives. And then they go get blood work. And again, I'm speaking outside of my expertise here. So these are just conversations that I've had, nothing based on the literature. They go get blood work done. Their blood work comes back and it's normal. There's nothing wrong with you. All of your stuff's in range. And they're very frustrated because, well, I can tell you I used to exercise and have energy, and now I don't. And not only do I not have energy, it's like not enough energy to get out of bed. And I hear this, this is a common problem. And there's a lot of physicians, at least I'm speaking in my country, They're just not willing to help. They're not willing to look deeper. And I don't know. I've been told that some of this is insurance driven because insurance does, they don't want to pay for extra tests or certain treatments because the parameter, the blood parameters are normal. So I hope that helps. Again, that's just my communications with people. And maybe next time we talk, I will be able to cite some literature as I look into that.
It does. It's really interesting. And I touched on the extreme example, and it's a menopausal female. So first off, we're thinking we're all human, we're all the same, but we've got a demographic and an age demographic. Let's push back to your area of expertise, a female that's not menopausal, but they're not just an average human as well. They fluctuate sort of 4 different hormone levels throughout the 4 weeks. So what's different about a female than a male when it comes to what you do, which is physique enhancement?
So I treat females no different than males. I do not plan my studies around their menstrual cycle. Now, some have done that. There is a little bit of it. There's at least one study that I'm aware of that indicated that females should train with a little more volume at the early part of their cycle. I choose not to do that. I'm much more of a broad perspective, a large filter, a large net initially.
Yep.
Now, you could say that because I don't do that, well, it doesn't apply. But what I would say is no, you can start any time of the month. It doesn't matter, during your menstrual cycle, you're not part of your menstrual cycle. The results that I'm putting out in my research, it doesn't matter. Just do these things. And again, because my studies are 8 weeks, I would say it doesn't matter over long term. Now, the more information that we get, I think those questions we can start to answer. But I still am under the belief that we don't have enough studies in females just in general. I don't want to be jumping to X, Y, and Z when I don't have A, B, and C taken care of.
Yeah. I love that because that simplifies it, because it's so complex out there. And we touched earlier, marketing is confusing because somebody has an agenda, but that's great because that simplifies it well. So then let's go to some direction on that physique enhancement. What's the first step that someone, from all the studies you've done, someone listen to this, what's the first step they should do for fat loss?
Caloric deficit. So, and let me say, my research, I believe, helps people optimize their physiques within a maintainable lifestyle. And let me explain what this typical person is. They are not stepping on a bodybuilding stage as a bikini competitor, figure competitor. They are also not obese and sedentary. The people that I'm really trying to research are people who already exercise, they already are fit, and they just, they're just kind of driven to be a little more fit or to have a little less body fat. That's where my research is really focused. Now, I said that they're not stepping on stage. I learn a lot from bikini competitors, and I've worked with a lot of them to learn from them. The experts in fat loss, as you know, are bodybuilders. They know it. They're ahead of the science. So I learn from them. But so that's kind of like who I think my research serves the best, is this female who's already training and is pretty serious about their nutrition. So I have the expectation that, we'll go back to your question. What's the first thing for fat loss, the first step? I have an assumption that they're already resistance training, that's just part of their lifestyle, whether that's 2 days per week, 4 days per week, we can get into the weeds there, but that's a base, that's their essence, that's their core exercise routine. After that, it's a caloric deficit. So reducing calories for a period of time. I don't like people being in a caloric deficit for long periods of time. Your body will start to work against you the longer you're in a caloric deficit. So something that I think I'm at the place now where I've come to realize, and again, this isn't going to be popular, but I think it's true. I will diet the rest of my life. I cannot stay lean as I want to all the time. I just am not that disciplined. So I have no problem admitting I'm going to go 2 or 3 months every year and I'm going to go on a diet and I'm going to do that hard. And hopefully I maintain it for a while. And if I do, great. But if I don't, that just means in another 9 months, 8 months, whatever, I'm going to diet again. So I think the physique lifestyle is one where you're kind of going to go on some diets every so often. And when you do, start with a caloric deficit, reduce your calories.
Thank you. That's, again, nice and simple. You've really contextualized the subject there, the person. Let me ask you a related, slightly tangential question then. Why doesn't someone just diet and do more cardio? Why doesn't that get someone leaner in comparison to what you do, which is resistance training, pretty good food? Why? Actually, I might have I've loaded that question, haven't I? But the difference between cardio and dieting versus resistance training and a small caloric deficit for a period of time. Why doesn't cardio get that leanness that people are wanting?
Oh, it will. Cardio is a great fat loss tool. It's awesome. The reason I wouldn't start there, and again, cardio is great for fat loss, and I would add it in after a caloric deficit has started the fat loss process. Yeah. My ideal, where I'm at right now, is you're always resistance training, and in a perfect world, you're also walking. I'll throw out 7,000 steps per day. That's your core. You're getting some benefits from the walking. It's aerobic exercise. You're helping with blood glucose sensitivity. So you're getting some good things, but it's not all out cardio. It's not running or elliptical. It's not getting your heart rate up. Now, all those are good things, but for fat loss, I suggest you start with a caloric deficit for a period of time. And we know that what happens is your body starts to adjust to your caloric deficit and your body will slow down its metabolism. That's when we start to see this change. Now, if we add in aerobic exercise to your fat loss strategy, to your fat loss plan, now we have an added stimulus, and that will have a great impact on fat loss. Plus, it helps maintain your muscle mass. That's what all the research says. And we can make one caveat there. So I do not withhold exercise. Another reason why I wouldn't start with exercise and make that your only cardio, the same thing happens. There's a theory called the constrained total energy expenditure model, where the longer you are in an increased energy expenditure state, like through exercise, your body starts to burn less and less calories during the other parts of the day. So your body will adjust to exercise just like it does to a diet. So that's why I prefer, let's layer this so that we're constantly giving the body a stimulus that it has not adapted to yet. So start with the caloric deficit, and I would keep the caloric deficit, but as the body doesn't respond to that as well, now let's add in cardio till we get to the body fat level we want. And then let's try to maintain that as part of our lifestyle. But if you don't, just like I don't, we just revisit that cycle in another couple months when you need to.
Brilliant. That's summed it up, answered that loaded question in a very broad way. Really cool.
Yeah. And let me add though, if somebody decides that they don't want to reduce their calories and they would just want to increase their exercise through aerobic exercise, they'll lose fat. And like I said, it's especially in females, they won't lose any muscle mass. You know, I used to think, oh, don't do cardio, you'll lose muscle mass. Try finding a study where that happens. The caveat there is, what if you have excess muscle mass to start with, like a bodybuilder? Do they lose muscle mass? And what I've found in the bodybuilding literature is males do tend to lose muscle mass when adding cardio to a diet. And this is all from the case study literature of bodybuilders preparing for a show. But almost exclusively females, and I'm relying on 5, maybe 6 case studies, they don't lose muscle mass when dieting, even when they're adding in cardio to that. And of course, we're assuming that they're resistance training.
Brilliant. I love how you base it on the data there. And that really changes perfectly into my question of what do you see as the biggest fat loss myths out there? I mean, you have subjects come in and they probably got ideas, and you're going, well, this is what we're doing. What are the sort of biggest fat loss myths you've seen in your time?
Yeah, the myth that bothers me is, and this is a general population, people who don't have a lot of education or knowledge, that the belief that X diet is the diet for fat loss. There is no best diet for fat loss. The best diet obviously is the one that you will stick to, the one that allows you to remain in a caloric deficit consistently. So people want to take, whatever the diet of the day is and say this is the best one. And then that's where I'm sure you can appreciate there's people profiting from each of these different factions. And you name a diet, and I'll say that's the perfect diet for some people. I'm never going to criticize a diet. I would probably criticize a diet that's low in protein for people that are trying to optimize their physique. But other than that, if they have a diet that they can stay on, that's a great diet. So I think keto is great for some people. I think carnivore might be great for some people, assuming they're getting enough micronutrients. I think flexible dieting is great for some people. That happens to be what I do. So the belief, that's one of the myths, that there is a superior method to fat loss.
Absolutely. I think it's the diet that you, will do, can do, and gets the result. And
yeah, I love that. That's easy to remember. Can do and will do. I love that.
How about, you talked about protein a few times. I'd like to go on to nutrition myths, but let's focus on protein itself, because you've spoken about it on many occasions there. What have you found about protein? And for the listeners here, Bill and I are probably the same genre. I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, 30 grams of protein was the limit a human could absorb and digest, and that was it. And then I think it was about 2 years ago. Now it's 40 grams. So the research is behind the eight ball, really. What have you found about protein for physique enhancement over your studies?
The evidence leads me to believe a high protein diet is the best diet for maintaining a lean physique, for carrying less body fat and having more muscle mass. I believe that the most important aspect is your total daily protein intake. That's where you should start your planning, and then a distribution of that protein across 3 to approximately 5 protein feedings, depending on your lifestyle. In an ideal world, if you're trying to build muscle, that's evenly distributed throughout the day. So we do have a research in humans. If you have a low protein breakfast, you are sacrificing muscle mass over an 8-week period. So have let's say you're going to do 4 meals, an equal amount at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and in a post-workout period. That's my ideal. So to answer your question broadly, high protein diets is part of the lifestyle approach to living a leaner life. Start with a total daily amount. I recommend 2.2 grams per kg. That's a little higher than what much of the research would suggest, but I'm basing my opinions on some limitations of that research. And then once you have that daily amount, divide it into whatever fits your lifestyle, anywhere from 3 to 5 approximately equal protein feedings throughout the day.
So 2.2 grams per kilo. I appreciate you for coming into the rest of the world and not using ounces. Let's throw back straight at your marketing, media not being reporting. Doesn't a high protein diet cause body damage? I don't know what they say, kidney damage, liver damage. Is a high protein diet safe or unsafe?
Yeah, I'm aware of no evidence to to suggest that a high protein diet is unhealthy in people who are healthy. If somebody has, kidney disease, they have a metabolic disease, I wouldn't say that. But in a healthy individual, all of the data seems to suggest that it's completely safe. And let me also say, I don't want to be wrong on this. People look to me for advice, and my message is one of high protein. I have children that eat higher protein. I don't want to be wrong. So that's if I'm wrong, I want to know, because I don't make money from the protein industry. Nobody's paying me to say this. It's my interpretation of the data. I actually offer to my students, because I don't want to be wrong, if they can give me evidence, so they can find one study that would report in healthy people that a high protein diet is unhealthy, I give them an A. Because they will have given me evidence that would make me reconsider my interpretation of the broader research data. And in all my years of doing this, I haven't had anybody present me with a study yet that would indicate that it's unhealthy. And I would also suggest this: we have an obesity problem across the developed world. And that's not popular to say right now. So in my aspect, one of the primary reasons is people they're losing their battle with hunger. Protein is the perfect nutrient. It's the best nutrient, maybe not be perfect. It's the best nutrient to make you feel full, both to end a meal, to feel more full between meals. And there's even there's a theory called the protein leverage theory, which suggests that you need X amount of protein per day to regulate your appetite and to make it sensitive to when you've had enough food. And if you don't meet that threshold of protein, you're going to be more likely to overeat. So I throw the whole protein aspect into an anti-obesity solution, or part of that solution. And of course, when you couple this with resistance training and cardio at certain times of the year, or again, daily walking, what do you have? You're going to have a healthy, lean individual.
I think you nailed it. Stepping off the physique enhancement in 2021 stage, though, I wonder, thinking out loud, if that protein leverage theory is not a survival and evolutionary switch that makes us go and find that protein, and if it's not available, that means we're in periods of starvation. I wonder if it's an evolutionary or biological switch we got in there to help us thrive as humans.
Yeah, that's a good question. I wouldn't. I don't know. I don't actually have an opinion on that, just because I haven't studied that.
I've interviewed a lot of scientists on the show in the years, and you're such a data-driven guy. It's a joy to speak to you with this. Thank you. We touched on the protein there. I'm going to tangent off there as well about data. Let's quickly talk about creatine. Again, creatine, I understand what it does performance enhancement wise, and that's part of what you study. But some of the media out there, people have a belief that creatine is dangerous to the human. What can you speak to on that?
Yeah, I don't. That's myth. I don't think I'm trying to think of any study. The only clinical side effect that I'm aware of is weight gain, and that doesn't happen to everybody. That's but that's if you're gonna say that weight gain is a negative clinical side effect, that's what creatine will do. But we know that that's likely an increase in muscle mass. It does seem like there is a short-term greater retention of water, which corrects itself within a week or two. So no, creatine is like you said, all about the performance stuff, and I'm aware of, and I don't have details on this. It helps with prevent concussion recovery. It helps with stroke recovery. There's some anti-cancer effects of creatine. It is so much more than a bodybuilding or fitness supplement. There are so many health benefits to creatine. I'm not in that area, but I appreciate it. It's a lot more than just trying to get stronger and bigger muscles and run faster.
Absolutely. So let's move on to that area about nutrition myths. We talked about the biggest fat loss myths, and you talked about the best diet. What's your biggest nutrition myths that people come to you with, or that you like to dispel?
I think you said the one: high protein's unhealthy. Our bodies can only digest and absorb 30 or 40 grams of protein. And to that, I always say your body will digest and absorb 1,000 grams. Your body's going to digest and absorb. I think what people really mean is there a limit on muscle protein synthesis with with a large amount of protein? I think in our space, that's really what they mean. Because if they really meant digestion and absorption, your body's going to handle whatever you put into your mouth. And there's clearly a diminishing returns with more and more protein. But of the few studies that have compared 20 to 30 grams or 20 to 40 grams on a per feeding basis or a per meal basis, I'm thinking of two studies. In both studies, they used resistance exercise as a stimulus to generate muscle protein synthesis, but it was like 3 sets of leg extensions or bicep curls, or it wasn't a realistic stimulus for what most people will do to increase muscle protein synthesis. The one study that did a whole body resistance training stimulus, this was McNaughton was the first author. They were the first group to say 40 was significantly better than 20, and they were the only ones to use a more realistic resistance training stimulus. The other thing is, even in the studies that showed that 20 was no better than 30, or 30 was no better than 20, or 20 was no better than 10, even both of them showed there was a greater muscle protein synthetic response the more protein you took. It just wasn't a significant increase, and it was a less and less of an increase. But if they had more subjects, had they given more protein, there was still an added benefit with higher protein on muscle protein synthesis. It just was a less and less. So I talked about this guidebook that I wrote. I recently just released this, and I talk about that exact that concept of higher and higher protein gives you less and less of a benefit. But as far as the research, if you're going to rely on the research, there's always still more of a benefit. And I think that's why you see these larger bodybuilders that eat higher amounts of protein. I think there's a reason why. Now, we can't demonstrate that with a study, and I'm knowingly extrapolating what I think would happen. But that's part of my rationale for suggesting higher than the typically agreed upon amount of 1.6 grams per kg. I go up to 2.2 for the reasons that I just suggested.
You touched on the book a couple of times, especially in particular. Can you please name the book and where to find it?
Yeah, it's called Building Your Ultimate Body. And it's in my if you go to my Instagram page, if you just click on the link in my bio, it will take you right to the sales page. And it's everything we're talking about here, really. And I'm sorry, I should have sent you a copy before we did this. My last 2 weeks have been you know how you've had some times that I have 2 different shoes on, you don't realize it till half the day's over. So that's been, I've had a rough 2 weeks with different things. But yeah, the guidebook is essentially everything we're talking about. It starts with your lifestyle. What can identify how much time you have per week for exercise, for food prep. Once we have that identified, now let's give you the perfect program for your lifestyle, for your available time. What about protein? How much protein can you comfortably ingest? And I also talk about resistance training. We talk about intensity, volume, frequency, training to failure or short of failure. So there's a very strong resistance training component to the book as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And again, for people listening that aren't reading the show notes, your Insta handle is?
Bill Campbell, PhD. And as you said, if I try to do a lot of education on there. So if you like quiz questions, I do quiz questions. And lately I've been talking about my book just because, again, I just released it a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I take a lot of pride in my Instagram because it's kind of my research life. It's kind of like my lifeblood. It's what are we doing in my lab, and then what are other people doing, and just trying to educate.
You're truly passionate, and that's what I love about my guests that come on. I'm honored to interview, and I say I interview the best people in the world at what they do. So thank you. I'd love to look at the book. I've got a couple of questions, but just to finish off on the protein subject, because that seems to be where we're at, and then we'll wrap it up. Branched chain amino acid powders and essential amino acid powders. I've seen some of the research on BCAAs. They're very popular to buy, and I'm sure they make a ton of money. What can you tell us about branched chain amino acids and possibly leading into essential amino acids and that versus food, perhaps?
Yeah, I don't see a utility for branched chain amino acids. I personally won't buy them. And the reason is, and I won't even buy an essential amino acid supplement, but if you're going to choose one or the other, essential amino acids make sense. But I just prefer a whole protein source. And even if that's supplemental, like whey protein or casein or pea protein, something that gives me the assortment of amino acids. Because when you are trying to build muscle mass, you have to have all of the amino acids. And if you do just take essential amino acids, yes, they can make the non-essential amino acids, but it is at the expense of the essential amino acids. So if I'm giving somebody, let's just say whey protein, since that's a popular supplement, if I'm giving them whey protein, they're getting the essential amino acids and the non-essential amino acids. So the muscle has all of the building blocks to build additional muscle mass or to maintain it if we're in a caloric deficit, so to speak. And from what I can understand, sometimes you pay a premium for essential amino acids or a premium for branched chain amino acids. And it just doesn't make sense to me. Just give your body the whole assortment. Give your body all 20 amino acids because it's going to want to use it if you've provided the stimulus through resistance training to adapt to that stimulus.
What a brilliant answer, and very, very well-rounded. I'd like to move on just to a couple of quick fire questions about maybe cardio. It's the wrong word, cardiovascular exercise, but high intensity exercise versus long, slow exercise in the endurance space. Which one would you suggest, or what do you know about the difference between the two?
Yeah, and I'm basing this on some readings that I've done years ago. So I am not up to date on this, but again, if you get me in January, I'm attacking this in October. Like I will have a good 40 hours in on this exact topic. But based on my readings from years ago, when you directly compare high intensity interval training, and by that I'm going to say 30 seconds of all out intensity, maybe 20, where you can't go much more, and then you relax for a minute or two or three, maybe 4. So you're all out, relax, all out again, relax. When you compare that head to head against traditional lower steady state cardio, the high intensity aspect seems to burn more body fat in comparison. Why does it do that? I don't know. Theories are it increases growth hormone. It increases oxygen consumption for a longer period of time. But I think the researchers in that area have said no, that while that may make sense, it's not what we actually see. So again, based on my recollection of the research, and again, this was years ago, and I will be up to speed on this soon. High intensity does seem better. However, I'm very cautious to say, well, that's what you should do, because I've seen a lot of people, particularly bodybuilders, they do this and then it totally impacts their recovery. And now their resistance training workouts do not have the intensity. They do not have the energy to get the most of the anabolic response out of their resistance training. And I look at it as when you're in a caloric deficit, you're in a constant catabolic state. There's only two things that are anabolic: your resistance training workouts and your protein intake. So we want to hit them with, we want to make sure that we have those anabolic stimuli in an otherwise catabolic state. And in that state, if you're going to choose to do high intensity interval training, I have been told by, bodybuilders that I used to work with, it's not ideal for an extended period of time. You start to get psychologically burned out and your resistance training starts to suffer. But to be fair to the literature, if you can do that and it doesn't impact your overall recovery, it's on paper a better form of a fat loss stimulus to the body.
Thank you. It's a very good answer. And you spoke to past literature. We just had the Olympics. I'm literally thinking as you're answering that, compare a 200-meter sprinter to a 10-15K runner. They're a very different physique.
Yeah.
As well. Last question. I think it's probably everything that you've spoken about there. Post-workout nutrition window. What can you, and I've left it very open there, what can you talk about with a post-workout nutrition window?
Yeah, I would separate that. First of all, who are we talking about? If you're an athlete, I would say get carbs, get protein, so that you can make sure that you're recovered going into your next practice or your next competition. If you're a lifestyle person like myself, I don't play sports, I'm just trying to look somewhat presentable at the beach. I choose not to have carbs after my workout. To me, just protein makes sense. I'm aware of 5 studies that have looked at protein timing, where the studies were specifically designed to answer the question, does protein timing work? The overall impression is it doesn't seem to make a difference. That what's more important is your total daily protein intake. However, I'm going to eat protein 4 times, 5 times, 3 times a day anyway. Why not make one after your workout? Because it doesn't hurt. And there is a study I'm aware of 2 where it actually showed it was beneficial. So to me, it makes sense. I'm going to eat protein anyway. Why not after my workout? Plus, I prefer whey protein after my workout. Whey protein will also increase insulin levels, and insulin will have a suppression of muscle protein breakdown. So that's another added benefit of whey protein post-workout. Or if you do have carbs after your workout, like in beverage form, that will also stimulate insulin secretion as well and give you a suppression of muscle protein breakdown.
Thank you again, a brilliant answer. Bill, you've been one of the most pragmatic people I've ever interviewed. Absolutely a joy to learn from. So I appreciate your time today. I hope that we've answered some of the questions for people about fat loss, physique enhancement. I always pull the title from maybe a quote that I get from a guest. I'm looking at something like a approach to living a scientific approach to living a leaner life, which again encompasses that healthy long-term thing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Is there anything you'd like to finish on while we've got you here today? So glad to have you in from Florida.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you respecting me and actually caring about my research and my thoughts on things. That's humbling to me. So I appreciate you for having me on the show. Thank you for that. And I would ask if people can go to my Instagram page. If you're into this stuff that we just talked about, I think you would love the information that I put out.
Absolutely. I mean, it attracted me, and it is for those geek. I call myself a geek. Your questions are so thought provoking, and you always want to get the question right. So it's great when you get it wrong and you've learned something. I love learning, and that's definitely what you put out there.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I get some of my own questions wrong sometimes, which is why I post them. I'm like, I didn't know this. It's like I gotta share this.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Bill, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.